Hey guys, welcome into the Bear With Us podcast. I'm Jack. He is Frank. We don't have an episode titles anymore. Divisional round, but the Bears aren't even playing. So you know what? How about this? Bear With Us podcast episode Bears hire Kevin Warren.
I'm all in. I think that's great.
It's
It's a phenomenal title.
Yeah. In case people missed the news, the Chicago Bears have hired Kevin Warren, former Big Ten commissioner, as their new CEO and president to replace Ted Phillips. He had his press conference, and Frank, I came away just super impressed by the guy. What did you think about Kevin Warren? Have you heard? Did you ever? I know you're not a really Big Ten football person or anything, but have you heard of him before?
So I had not heard of him before the initial report, which I think was a leak. I don't think it was supposed to come out as early. That was when I first heard of him. So I did a little bit of digging myself to see what he'd done. Adam and Hogue I listened to, and they sort of gave a somewhat of a deep dive on him. I think they brought someone else on. And it was interesting to me that that he was with the Vikings in some capacity, helped them build their stadium. There was another NFL team that I'm blanking on that he was with.
He was with the Detroit Lions.
The Lions. And I forget, he led some other project there as well. But the biggest thing that everyone seemed to hit on, Hogan Johns being, one of them, but even like people on Twitter was like, this tells you how big of a deal it is to be a part of the Chicago Bears. Because by all accounts, being the commissioner of the Big Ten was his title. That's the biggest job in sport, the most sought after job in college football. That's what seemed to be the sentiment and like sort of verbatim of, some people were saying. So the fact that you leave that, and now granted, that could be like personal, I want to be in the NFL and everything. But again, it didn't sound like he was just leaving that job for any NFL job. So for him to come into this opportunity, and so I had only heard of him about a week ago, but the one thing, and I'll throw it to you, Jackie, the one thing that really excites me, man, and I think maybe we can touch on sort of maybe what we're worried about or just anything like that, the sort of the flip side to it, but we seem to just be entering a new era. I hear this guy talk, and it's just drastically different than what I heard from Ted Phillips. It's drastically different than what I hear from George McCaskey. This dude just seems like he knows his shit. Like, even think of like some GMs that we had in the past. Jerry Angelo didn't inspire, I don't think, anyone in Chicago the way, not that he's our GM, but I'm just sort of naming people now. But I sort of felt that way about Ryan Poles too, where it was just the way he commands the room. That doesn't mean you're going to be good at your job. These guys may all wind up failing, but it just feels different. And then you couple that with, we have the first pick. We probably have our quarterback of the future. We have a regime that seems to be building this foundation that we can move forward. I mean, it just feels like something's coming together. It's like the infancy of something that has the potential to be great. And I'm a little worried because, I haven't drank the Kool-Aid yet, right? But I'm getting there, and I know I will. I'm like one press conference away at this point from like really being all in on the total regime, but yeah, man, it's hard to not be impressed with, whether or not you looked into his past and what he's done there, or just basing it off his press conferences. It's exciting, man. What about you?
Yeah, just kind of hearing some of the things that he was saying, George McCaskey obviously as well. One of the biggest things that I absolutely loved Kevin Warren saying, and it kind of, he reminded me a lot of Ryan Poles just when he came in, basically saying it's okay to raise expectations here. Like, this isn't child's play. This is the Chicago Bears. Like, we want to win, and he wants to win. Talked about how he wants to win the North, NFC, Super Bowl. Like, he has a very clear path. And it's interesting that George McCaskey is, again, sort of getting out of the way. Ryan Poles will now be, reporting directly to Kevin Warren, and Kevin just has a lot of experience. He seems like a football guy who's also very good at business, whereas Ted Phillips was a business guy who liked football, like, as a fan. Like, that's kind of the biggest difference to me is Like the Bears are going to make a shit ton of money from Kevin Warren being their CEO and president. But what excited me most was his experience with working with other franchises. He's clearly a guy who knows and understands football and what it means to be a win. Like, you look at some of the things that the Big Ten was able to do when he was commissioner. I mean, it's pretty impressive. And he obviously had a relationship with Justin Fields. He said he has a strong personal relationship with them. Talented, a leader, loves his passion. He wants to win the championships. Those are the people that he wants. So, boom, there you go. We can stop with the Bryce Young #1 trade Justin Fields conversation. It's not happening.
Wait, so you don't want to pair a good quarterback with our good running back? That's what you're telling me.
I don't. I want another running back to pair with our other running back, and we'll run a 2 running back system.
Pick Bijan 1-1-1. Let's do it. Who says no?
I don't. But listen, like it just. I mean, you think about just some of those press conferences we sat through the last few years of us even doing this podcast, not just you and I as Bears fans in general, but while we've had this podcast, I mean, it's been rough. And just hearing him, the confidence in which he spoke, right? And the Bears have now a black CEO, a black GM, and a black quarterback, and like that's what they're going with for the future. I think that's extremely cool. But I'm a little conflicted, Frank, and I'll say why, and I'm curious to get your thoughts. I always talk about the Bears being a step behind. And in terms of the hire, that is not the case. I have not seen a single person being like, oh, I don't know about this hire. This hire makes no sense, right? Everybody's on board. My only thing is, like, the Bears love to do things just kind of like backwards or out of order at the very least, right? Like, we had the quarterback, then we went to the GM and the head coach, and now we're getting the CEO. Like, when we, a couple of years ago, or a year ago at this time, I should say, we're talking about sort of what we wanted to see the Bears do. If you remember, it was bring in Rick Smith as your head of football guy, and then let him hire a GM and a head coach and work your way down. But we got half of that with the GM and the head coach, but now we're getting the CEO. So that's my only hesitancy. It's like, you know, they talk about how, you know, I heard Kevin Warren talking about how much he loves polls and how excited he is and how smart he is and this and that. But kind of what you touched on just a second ago, where you were like, well, I haven't drank the Kool-Aid yet on this front office. And, you know, as exciting as these hires are, as exciting as it is to have the first pick, have Justin Fields, we've talked about it numerous times, like, there's still a lot of questions that need to be answered. How quickly would Kevin Warren be willing to make change as needed? So that's my only, like, it has nothing to do with him specifically. It's just like, I would be much more excited about this hire if he had maybe a clean slate. But now it's kind of like, all right, are we just trying to fit pieces together to make it work? Or is this what he actually wants? Because last thing, and then I'll throw it to you, he specifically said, I did not reach out to anyone in the Bears about this job. They reached out to him, which is cool. But yeah, you know, it just makes me a little concerned.
So it's for you, it's more of the order of operations. If it would have started from the top down versus the way it panned out, there'd be a little bit more comfort there. I hear that is a little bit less of a worry to me. I'll get to my worry, but the thing that I really like about it was that was the one thing that that why Ryan Pace probably kept his job for an extra year is because he was at the forefront with Ted Phillips, renovating Hallis Hall and getting those practice facilities up to date. He did a lot of that operational stuff that he shouldn't have been doing as a GM because we were just still in the dark ages, and I don't think it was a cheap thing. I just think the Bears didn't know how to like really structure an organization. Like they were still struggling with what they wanted the structure to be. So that's what's most encouraging to me is seems to be a traditional structure of, the way that most pro teams operate. And the other reason why that doesn't worry me as much is because the way that it sounds is that, at least for the time being, Kevin Warren's biggest project right now, his biggest thing, is that stadium. And that was what dominated that press conference. I know George said, like, some of the things that they talked about was when he was able to build, I think it was the Vikings one, is that they did it on time and under budget. So those are things that if they can get, so it's very clear they've had these discussions. They're discussing what they can do with the land. I'm sure they're discussing with the local, politicians there of what it would look like tax wise and yada yada, and the state people, and they're getting all that taken care of. So that's a huge project in and of itself. So for me, knowing that Ryan Pace and probably Jerry Angelo and those before him were tasked with these sort of things, that probably was, and this is just sort of random, but probably why you thought Shane McClellan was a good player. Maybe you didn't put in all the scouting that you needed to because there was other things on your plate, right? And that's the most encouraging to me, is that there seems to be clear boundaries, at least as it stands. Kevin Warren is our business guy. Does Ryan Poles report to him? Yes, but it does not sound like Kevin Warren is going to supersede anything from a football standpoint. You're talking about the books at that point. You're talking about the cap space, things like that. That's a normal way of operating. My worry, Jack, is we hired Ryan Poles without someone in place, and he was reporting directly to George McCaskey. I know Ryan Poles was a part of these interviews, and that's normal as well. I have been a part of interviews to hire my supervisor. That's a normal business practice, so that's not my worry. But with the structure changing going from year one to year two, was this something that Ryan Poles knew what would happen when he was interviewing in year one, or did this sort of be sprung upon him? That's my worry. I don't know if that's been dispelled. I don't know if that's been talked about yet. But part of me feels like, and this is where I'm starting to drink the Kool-Aid a little bit, Jack, is when Ryan Poles was asked about what happens if what is it, the assistant GM, about Cunningham? What is his first name? Ian Cunningham. What's going to happen if he gets a job? He said, look, the plan was for him to be a GM somewhere else. That's why we have him, and we knew we were going to lose him. I already have a plan for that once he does, rightfully so, get hired elsewhere. That to me means Ryan Poles is future focused. So if the Bears didn't proactively bring this up, I'm very sure that he was the one that brought it up in these interviews. Hey, what is this going to be the structure? There is no, because he's been a part of organizations before. He knows what it's supposed to look like. Is there going to be a president, or is it going to continue to be George, or is it going to look? So it's like, my worry is that the change happened and it may have caught him off guard, but part of me feels like he's already so prepared looking into the future that that base had to have been covered one way or another, if not a two-way street.
I think that I think I would also agree with you that I would be surprised if Ryan Poles, if this wasn't the expectation, only because, as George McCaskey said, I've seen how Kevin Warren has worked with other NFL teams. That's why Ryan Poles is reporting to him. I don't know of too many teams that go from GM directly to the owner, other than obviously the Cowboys. And that's because your GM is the owner and he's probably talking to himself in the mirror. But I would be surprised if Ryan Poles was not used to that structure, even more so than sort of what they've had. It was really cool hearing Kevin Warren talking about his, how he wants to plan to make the stadium an identity of the team, like an extension of their identity. I thought that was really, really cool because, you look at, US, that stadium in Minnesota is just, it's incredible. And he seems very excited to be here, more so than your typical new hire. I usually don't really care to listen to those because they're all pretty much just the same. But the way he was just talking, you just sounded very confident about, he was like, this is the place I'm meant to be. And I agree with you. I don't think they've said that Ryan Poles has final say, complete control on the football side. What I like, though, is that Kevin Warren isn't a guy that you can't go to for more perspective, for thoughts on something. He seems to really understand the game. And he was talking about how he was in the draft room with Ryan Poles just earlier before they did a bunch of interviews. And he's like, we're on the same page. a guy that confident trusts Ryan Poles' plan, that makes me feel better about kind of things moving forward, for sure.
And it, like you said, seemingly he understands the game, or at least has like a philosophy of the game, versus like George has admitted he's just a fan.
He's just a fan.
And that's fine. That's completely okay. And I think that's why he's doing this. But think of it from Ryan Poles' perspective. Instead of bouncing something off of Ted Phillips, who isn't a football guy either. I know we rag on him, and rightfully so in certain situations, but at the end of the day, he got hired to be something that he just wasn't. Outside of the business acumen, the football side, that's not him. Same thing with George McCaskey, that's not him. So from Ryan Poles' perspective, I get, just like you said, I get to bounce this off of someone that knows what he's talking about. That even if he's still giving me the autonomy, if I disagree with him, just to hear another perspective that has experience behind it on the football scene, that's huge. So that portion is great. And honestly, Jackie, the last thing for me, well, my son says I have to stop calling you Jackie. Him and his mom listen to the podcast as she's like working out and stuff.
It's okay.
So he's gonna get mad at me. He told me that twice today. I can't call you Jackie. But last thing is, can we put to bed any chance that the Bears are staying in Chicago?
Yes.
It's silly. And to a point, I didn't watch them live. I watched a little bit of the clips on Twitter of the mayoral debates. And there's already like 3 or 4 candidates that are like, they're leaving. They're not like, so there seems to be acceptance now of like, and Lori's still doing her thing with, well, we can like do this and we can do that. And I get it from her perspective. She's going to be blamed, or whoever's the mayor, they may just shift in whoever wins this election and does it. So to a degree, I get it, but it's not happening. The city of Chicago cannot provide the Chicago Bears and the McCaskies with what they're asking for. It's not possible.
It's interesting that you say that, Frank, because like I kind of get the sentiment, and I obviously I do not live in Chicago like you do, but from an outsider's perspective, looking in, and just sort of the interactions that you see on Bears Twitter and things like that, I feel like the overall sentiment wouldn't be, oh, Lori Lightfoot lost the Chicago Bears. It's almost like they want them to. I'm sure there are a lot of people in Chicago who do not want to see that team move to the suburbs for obvious reasons. But I feel like the overall sentiment is like, yeah, of course they're going to move. They want a big stadium. There's not enough room in the city. Like, it's just not feasible about what they're trying to do. It makes no sense to stay in the city at this point. It makes no sense.
It doesn't. I think every rational fan that I've seen with the take, and there's really no hot take to have about this. There just isn't. So it's, from a business standpoint, it makes the most sense. But then, like, when they unveiled that first blueprint of what is going, like, what their plans are, and that could always change, but I would assume it'd be more layout changes than like ideas that they have. There's going to be like a casino there and some hotels and just all this shit going on. Like, when you think about the fan experience in Chicago for the Bears, the traffic fucking sucks. That stadium is in a horrible spot. It's by all the museums over there. The parking is awful. Trying to get off Lakeshore Drive right there, you're stuck in traffic to get off right there for like 45 minutes unless you get there at like 7 a.m. or 8 a.m. It's insane. And then the only fan experience that you get is the fucking tailgating before the game, which is phenomenal because the fans are getting drunk, and like sometimes George goes out there and like, shakes people's hand, and that's great. Those are awesome things. There's going to be a million more things to do in Arlington Heights once that thing gets built, with everything they have going on, to a point where, like, you're talking about an outsider's perspective, Jack, we have one of the biggest fan bases in the nation. It's the same thing with the Chicago Cubs. Like, that people were excited that like hotels are being built. They're like, you want to talk about a fan experience? I get to go there, not have to worry about driving from a hotel downtown or in the Loop somewhere. I get to be right there, gamble for a few days beforehand, go to the game, tailgate if I want to, walk to the stadium, walk back to my hotel room, and leave on Monday or Sunday. Like, are you kidding me? That's a fucking experience compared to what the hell we have at Soldier Field. So it's like, again, people, and to me, it's a bipartisan or nonpartisan, whatever you want to call it. Like, I don't care, left, right, within the city. This is not a political thing. This isn't. It's it's happening for business reasons beyond anything that the city can do. The talks that they're having now are just too little, too late, because they keep unveiling this. Oh, it'd be beautiful. Yeah. We did this, and it looks phenomenal. Those things look great. Let's not get it twisted. That's still owned by the Park District, Jack. That's not the McCaskies owning that, so that they can't host their own concerts. They can't host their own high school championship football game. Like, they're not getting any of the money there. They don't want that anymore. That's probably part of the reason why they ran like a mom and pop, because they're not fucking maximizing profits on a land that they don't own.
So what you just touched on, I think, is where we can sort of end this conversation. Kevin Warren said it's okay to raise the expectations. And
there it is.
I think that's all you need, right? You have the smallest stadium in football for what you said as one of the biggest fan bases. And it just, the overall experience, like, people don't want to go to the game because it's a huge pain in the ass, and the stadium is also incredibly small, and there isn't a lot to it when you're at that stadium. Is it not the smallest NFL stadium that seats the least amount of people? It is. It's the smallest stadium. So you are raising the expectations by not acting like a mom and pop shop. Now You're acting like a big boy NFL franchise, like one of the biggest ones, and that's how you draw free agents to your team. That's how you do some of these things that they've been desperately trying to do for years, and it hasn't worked. So again, it's just changing those expectations, which I think is really cool. I think this Kevin Warren stuff is going to be great. I'm very excited, and I've literally, Frank, I haven't seen anyone speak otherwise. The overall sentiment is like, this is a slam dunk hire. This is great for the Bears. It's very exciting. And a couple other noteworthy things for the Bears specifically is Ian Cunningham appears to be staying. I think the only two GM jobs open were the Cardinals and the Titans. He had a second-round interview with the Titans. He's staying. They went with the 49ers, who got 2 third-round picks, which, if you're asking me, I probably would have had rather picks, but it is what it is. So he's staying. And then Luke Getsy will actually be head coaching at the Senior Bowl, along with the Raiders defensive coordinator. And they always do that with like the lower pick teams. They usually have one of the coaches, get an opportunity to do that, which it's interesting on two fronts. Number one, it's good that Luke Getsy is there, because that just gives him more information about offensive linemen who are there, quarterbacks, because Frank, I'm going to be honest with you. The Bears might need to draft a backup quarterback. Like, they might, and if you hit on a guy and he ends up being like Kirk Cousins, boom, you trade him and you get more value. So, you get wide receivers, you get running backs. Like, it's such an in-depth look at some of those guys, on defense too. I think it's a huge benefit that Luke Getsy will be there. The other interesting thing, Frank, and I want to get your thoughts on Luke Getsy doing this. Clearly, the NFL and people in that circle view him as still, with all the issues they've had offensively towards the end of the year, they still view him as a very, high potential coach in the future. So what do you think about Luke Getsy, getting an opportunity to do that? Yeah,
I mean, just like you said, it's an opportunity to get a really close look at these guys. That can never hurt. That can absolutely never hurt, because we're going to have scouts there anyway. But to me, I don't know if he's calling plays. I don't know if any of those details ever come out, but even just like, how do they take to coaching? How did they act? You get to see things that you won't see in a normal scouting process, right? Like, you can hear things about a locker room. You can talk to coaches that people are always available to talk, but to really see it, that's huge intel. And I hope that Luke Getsy can, really pay attention to things and keep notes and be able to report back to Eberflus and to Ryan Poles. But yeah, it's a unique perspective, and I thought that was pretty exciting. But yeah, just like you said, people are still very high on him, and I think rightfully so. We got upset with him, and I think again, that's rightfully so. There were things that we just disagreed with later in the year, in regards to his play calling. But the biggest thing overall was he had a huge hand in helping Justin Fields develop to get to where me and you feel, and a lot of other people feel, like he's the franchise guy. That's really all that matters out of this past season. So people should be high on him still. I again, for a multitude of reasons, I'm glad that he did not get hired to be a head coach. I think continuity matters, and I think with more weapons, I think, you know, not only can you continue to hire that ceiling of Justin Fields and the floor at that, but then you get a chance to really show what you are as a play caller. Because again, like we, you know, threw Justin Fields some lifeguards that he deserved, and I don't think we ever did that with Getsy. And as a play caller, again, like, he's limited too. There's only so much you can do with Dante Pettis as your number one late in the year. You know what I mean? And EQ is your number two. So it's like, yeah, I'm really excited about that. I'm excited that other teams are still excited about him because he should get a head coaching opportunity in another year or two. But yeah, the whole situation, I think only positives can come out of this situation.
Yeah, I mean, there's two, like for example, there's two offensive tackles, one from Minnesota, one from Ohio State. The one from Minnesota, I'm going to butcher his name. It looks like it's Daniel Falele, 6'8", 387 pounds.
Holy fuck.
And there's one from Ohio State, DeJuan Jones, 6'8", 359 pounds.
My God.
So getting an up-close look at those guys and really getting a feel for who they are as people, as players, how seriously they take the game, like that's incredible value to just be able to see it in action. There's also a lot of pass rushers. Texas Tech, Tyree Wilson is an interesting piece. Zach Harrison from Ohio State. So like there are the Senior Bowl is not just, you know, the way that it is evolved, it's pretty incredible. Just sort of how they've worked. Like you think of guys last year who went, Dameon Pierce, Brian Robinson, Rashad White. Like there are a lot of guys who go to this now, and it's just that extra little bit of intel, getting to work with them in person, I think is just super valuable. Frank, there's one last thing I wanted to talk about before we get to our divisional round picks. Because there's some really interesting games this week, obviously. But it was a question that I sent you. I don't know if you remember, but it basically was from Bears Nation on Twitter. They said, which would you rather be? 13-4, aka the Vikings, make it to the divisional round and lose to the 9-7-1 Giants, or would you rather have the number one pick? I'm sorry, not the Vikings. That would have been the Eagles. So would you rather be the Eagles or and lose to the Giants, or would you rather have the number one pick? And Patrick Finley of the Sun-Times.
Oh, wait. But no, I think you had it right the first time. The Eagles are playing, or are they saying in this situation the Eagles are going to lose to the
like which
Giants?
Would you rather? Yeah, or maybe it was the Vikings. I don't know.
I think it was the Viking. I think it was because they lost to them.
Yeah, that would make sense. But Patrick Finley of the Sun-Times basically said, obviously, the first one, when did Bears fans become brainwashed into thinking that winning 13 games wasn't the point of playing? And I just really wanted to quickly go over that because I think you and I both have a differing opinion for Patrick Finley. I don't think it's necessarily Bears fans were just dying to have the number one pick this year. That's not the case. You and I both know this based off our podcast, based off the things we saw. Nobody was like, we need, fuck winning games. But like, I feel like this kind of coincides with everything you and I had sort of thought about when it comes to the Chicago media, basically pitting themselves against fans, being like, why would you want to sit Justin Fields? Don't you want to win games? And it's like, dude, like, you're missing the whole point. I don't understand how it's not obvious at a certain point where you're like, what the fuck are we playing for? But specifically to the 13-4 stuff. It really depends, doesn't it? Like,
yep.
The Packers were 13-3, winning all those games. One of the worst 13-3 teams you've ever seen, and you knew that they weren't going to win a Super Bowl. And obviously, it's a little bit different. You have Aaron Rodgers, but like, it has nothing to do with being brainwashed. It's about where your team is, and are you going to win with a roster like that? Can you win with a roster like that?
Well, see, and to your point, the correct answer is it depends, because you're negating all context with that tweet. In this 13-4 scenario, did Chase Claypool get 800 yards in a Bears uniform in those in the second half of the season and 6-7 touchdowns? Did David Montgomery all of a sudden start looking like Saquon Barkley? Did Justin Fields throw for 4,000 yards on the season and just surpass any expectation we had for him? And then absolutely, I don't give a fuck what happens in the playoffs. If that's what got us there, yes, that's what you want. But the reality of the situation was that none of that happened. So why would you, and this has always been my problem with Chicago sports, is that it always seems like, we're in purgatory. The Bulls are back to purgatory now. We're going to be a 6-7 seed, maybe. But we're not good enough to get the first, or we're not good enough to make a real splash in the playoffs. But we're also not bad enough to get the number one pick or a lottery pick. And when we do, we pick Patrick Williams. But you know what I'm saying? And that's the same thing. It's with the Sox consistently get 71 wins. They're good enough to keep you until the last month. And then the Cubs are usually the same way. We can get you 75 wins, 72 wins. And maybe you squint and if we add this veteran, we could do a little something. No. So I would much rather, I will always take the number one pick and hope over being in that middle line of six wins, 7 wins. And it's stupid.
It's about how you're winning those 13 games. Are you winning them like the Vikings did, where a lot of it was one score games,
yep.
Or you blow out one team 1 week and then get absolutely smoked by your divisional rival the next week? Let's be realistic. How are those 13 wins happening?
Yeah.
Again, I don't like that Bears fans are being shamed for being excited about having the first pick. I don't like that.
That's the big part, is dude, just let us be fucking happy right now. We can't be happy. Yeah, we can't be happy to have the number one pick, to have what seems like a franchise quarterback, to have a new president, to have sort of a new chapter and all this whole thing. For him to go that far and say you're brainwashed, and again, no one was rooting for the number one pick until the very last week when it was a real possibility. Then absolutely, I want it to happen.
Right.
But again, I think everyone would agree, if Justin puts together 2 or 3 game-winning drives and we end the year with 5 wins or 6 wins versus 3, we take that, because I will take tangible progress from your franchise quarterback over the number one pick. But the situation just didn't happen. You can blame him, you can blame the line, you can blame whatever. They just didn't happen, and that's okay. But it's to act like people were rooting for losses since week 3. That's never been the case.
And you also be realistic about what your team is. Nobody thought the Bears were winning 13 games. You and I especially did not. We thought the ceiling maybe was 8 to 9 wins if everything played out perfectly, which obviously we know it did not. But I mean, of course Bears fans would take 13 wins, but I'm also not going to listen. The Bears in 2018 won 12 games. That's one less than what you're talking about. And what have they done since then? Nothing. So I would have rather had the first round pick than be a fraudulent 12-4 team. It also depends who's the fucking first overall pick, right?
Yeah.
If you could get Andrew Luck or Trevor Lawrence at number 1 versus winning 13 games in a season that ends up not mattering, and then you move on from Lamar Jackson, or Kirk Cousins is another year older. I don't know. I just don't think it's as simple as being how is it not obvious that you take 13 wins over the first overall pick?
And to the point that I made on our "this is why the Bears are going to be a playoff team this year," when we sort of did the both sides of the coin, I had said the ceiling I think is, if all goes right, 8 wins, maybe 9, because depends on what the Lions do. Maybe you could sneak both wins against them. But it was I almost don't want that to happen, because I don't want this regime to be fooled into thinking that there's more talent on this team than there actually is.
Right.
I don't want them to trade away a couple future firsts for that missing piece, Khalil Mack, like our version, the 2023 Khalil Mack. That just isn't going to be helpful at all. You're just ruining your future for a team that's middling. And so to me, yes, the number 1 overall pick is better than that. But again, if I was also of the mindset of, if we get into any way that we get into the playoffs, and in this scenario, that's what we're talking about. We get into the playoffs, we get smacked in the first round again. That is great experience for Justin Fields. So any way we could have gotten there this year, I would have been all for. But that's the context of this team, this specific team. Generally speaking, about a 13-4 team, or even if we're isolating it to the Vikings, no, I don't want that Viking season. Because just like you said, now Kirk is another year older. Adam Thielen, who the fuck knows what's happening with him? Dalvin Cook, running backs age like milk. He looks worse and worse as the weeks go on.
You're going to have to pay KJ Osborne, or some team's going to have to come get him now. Like,
I wouldn't mind him on the Bears. But
he'd be our number one.
He would.
You said that about how many times do you think?
At least 30 other receivers. But I mean, no, but like, again, like you can't just generally speak that way. Right. Like because if you just speak in the simplest forms, Jack, would you rather win 13 games or one? You're always going to pick. I don't even have to tell you the sport or the activity that we're doing. You're always going to pick winning. But it's about context. We're realistic about this team. Like, but again, I think you had the correct take, the best take about it. Let us be happy. Why can't we just be happy right now?
It's just so weird. It's just such a weird. It feels like they're all doing it too, where they're like, there was another one on there. Oh man, I'm blanking on the name, but basically he was like, Joe Shane and Brian Dable were, in talks to be the Bears head coach.
No.
It's like Mark Potash of the Sun-Times as well. It's like, dude, like, why? I don't. It's like they think they have to remind Bears fans of just how miserable things have been, and that's I don't agree with being like, you're brainwashed if you wanted the first overall pick, even though the first overall pick might put us in a position to win 13 games next year. Not that that's I don't think that's going to happen. We'll see. But having the first round pick instead of just winning 13 games with this specific roster, now you have that first round pick and are able to change it, move it, use it to do other things to make your team, give yourself better opportunities to improve your team. Like, one of my biggest, and this is kind of maybe where we can end this conversation, depending on how you want to respond, but one of my biggest critiques and of my time as a Colts fan was, and something I genuinely was concerned about, was that rookie season that Andrew Luck won 11 games. That team was not good enough to win 11 games. I still don't know how they did it. It's because Andrew Luck was fucking incredible in his rookie year and onwards. But the problem was that they were doing exactly what Patrick Finley was saying. It's like, obviously you'd rather win 11 games than get the first overall pick. The problem was that they weren't able to use high enough draft picks to improve their team. They were drafting Bjorn Warner and trading their first round pick for Trent Richardson, which ended up being Johnny Manziel, which ended up being a wash in general. Who cares? But like, when you were outperforming what your roster is truly capable of, nobody looked at those Colts teams as legitimate contenders until, of course, 2018, when Andrew Luck retired right during the preseason. But they were so good. They were winning all these games. They were making the playoffs. Good for them. They kept getting smacked around by better teams, and they never were able to build a consistent winner. So that's always the context that I'm coming from.
Yep.
Where, why would you want to win all these games if you know your team isn't good enough to win it all? Isn't that the point of the whole thing?
Yeah.
Give me the Super Bowl over 13 wins. I don't care if they win 9 games and they win the Super Bowl. You know what I'm saying? Like,
I mean, because especially with this specific roster, if we to win 13 or even like the 8 that we thought, literally everything has to go right. You're talking about, Justin Fields not having any tip passes for intercepted. So much would have to go right that you sneak in there. And again, but to me, that experience would still be great for Justin and the guys that are going to be carryovers 100%. But again, that's still I would, even in that scenario, I feel like the number one pick is probably better for this team's future than a playoff loss and good experience for him. And I really, my closing thoughts for it is, you think the Chicago Bears with a $6,000 suit is looking at the New York Giants saying, we want Dable, we want their GM?
Come on, come on, come on, come on.
Come on!
They were never coming here.
They weren't, and we don't know why. They were linked very early, and to a point where people were like, the Giant, I don't know if this is confirmed true or not, but that the Giants colluded, or not colluded, but they, what is it called when you speak too early?
Tampered.
Tampered. They tampered with Dable. They knew it, but, and I don't know if there's like agents involved that are, in New York that Dable's with. Who knows? But he was connected very early. We knew that that's where he was going. But he was our number one pick. We wanted him. So it's not like
I was gonna say that's the
Yeah,
only
so-
thing that makes it a little bit difficult is just the sense that he was our number one pick.
And to be fair, Brian Flores was my number 2.
It sounds like he might
And
have a shot.
And we did, but even before we hired Eberflus, we started to warm up more to him based on his other interviews and what was coming out about him. So I want to say he landed like 3rd, because I don't remember who my 3rd was.
Yeah,
And I want to say he landed 3rd for me.
I don't think either one of us wanted at all Kevin O'Connell, even though that's obviously, I mean, it worked out pretty well in his rookie season.
Yeah.
He won 13 games.
We just had a whole argument about winning 13 games, but now you're saying this.
I mean, for him, that's good because they have a team that is capable, that could have potentially won a Super Bowl if their defense had been any sort of good, and every game was played at noon at home. But Mike McDaniel, I don't think either one of us really wanted McDaniel.
No, and he would have been one that probably would have been really fucking good, though. I mean, his scheme.
Man, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. It didn't look like the ski. Listen,
You had Skylar Thompson in there. Come on.
But we said multiple times that any quarterback could work in that offense. So maybe we have to give Tua
Well, I mean,
a little bit more credit.
he had a couple good games with them, but at the end of the day, you're still hitting a ceiling with Skylar Thompson.
They could have had Brock Purdy. They didn't draft him.
Literally everyone could have had Brock Purdy.
The legend.
Yeah.
The legend himself. You owe him an apology.
Well, the one we also didn't want was Doug Peterson, which now looking back may have been a pretty good hire.
Okay, but hold on, because this is you bring up a really good point. This is going to be hindsight stuff, and maybe we could talk about that.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
Let's do our picks, and we'll talk about the Doug Peterson thing real quick because they're literally the first game. So
all right,
let's get into our picks for the divisional round. I went 5-1 last week. Thank you, Frank, for convincing me to change from the Giants. Did you take the Cowboys, or did you go Brady in the Bucs?
I went Brady.
Okay. I'm glad we were wrong. I'll just say that. I was laughing my ass off watching him miss throw after throw. He looked.
But even that
terrible.
red zone pick, I mean, he has to retire. He's petrified to get hit. He used to take hits in the pocket.
That was a really. I think it was. God, who was it? Was it Shannon Sharp? I think it was. It might have been Shannon Sharp, which I never really watch too much. No, I don't think it was. But it was someone on one of those shows, and they made a very good point about how it's not the arm talent for Brady that's suffering. It's literally that he cannot take a hit.
No, I mean, he's like 90.
It's a very good point. Yeah, he is. In football years, I would say yes. But yeah, so a solid week for both Frank and I. Obviously, he took the knock with my bullet with going against Trevor Lawrence. You disrespected him, you fraud. And you,
I did. You're
you
right.
picked the Chargers. Like, what
I
are
did.
you doing? What are you doing? But first game on Saturday is Jacksonville at Kansas City. Frankie, who are you taking in this game?
I'm going with the Chiefs. Love me some Trevor. Love what I see out of him. This is where it ends. Listen, if you're giving up 27 points in the first half, granted, Trevor Lawrence throwing picks to the Chargers. What the fuck are you going to do against Patrick Mahomes in this offense? This may be a 17-point win for the Chiefs. There's no shot. You're not doing it.
Oh yeah. Give me the Jaguars. I broken the rule a couple times this year with the Chiefs. I think I was right once and wrong the other time, but you know what? Listen. There's something about these Jaguars. They give me a little Eagles vibe, a little 2018 Eagles vibe. Obviously, they have a much better quarterback than Nick Foles playing, but listen, man, there are a lot of things that can happen when a team rallies like that and wins a game the way that they won. I know it was at home. I know it's the Chargers.
Dude, that atmosphere, dude, that crowd was going fucking crazy.
I was very impressed by Jacksonville, Florida. I was very, very impressed. I know it's in Kansas City. I know it's colder weather. Obviously, it's not going to be 80 degrees or whatever it was in Jacksonville. But man, there's something about this Jaguars team that I can't help but not pick them. Like Kansas City, there were at times they kind of looked like they were coasting. And I know that obviously they're one of those teams that can just flip a switch, but you always get a little bit cautious about teams that do have that bye week, that have that extra week off. Some things maybe, they get a little bit sluggish. They maybe start a little bit slower. And that Chiefs defense, is definitely their weak point. I don't know. There's just something about this matchup that I like for Jacksonville, and I'm probably going to be dead wrong. It's probably going to be like 42-7 or something like that at the end of the game. But listen, talk about experience. Doug Peterson has experience.
Yeah,
all right?
He does.
He has a lot of experience in the playoffs.
He does.
And you saw just some of the things they were doing, some of those play calls, man. You saw that touchdown that Trevor Lawrence had, that fake where it just reaches the ball over the. That's incredible stuff, man. That's incredible.
Well, Tyler Huntley saw that and tried to do it himself. He just is like 8 inches shorter than Trevor Lawrence, so it wasn't very good. Listen, Jack, that all sounds cute, but the Chiefs are beating the fucking brakes off the Jaguars. I know the Jaguars have your heart at this point, but it's just not happening. But since we want to talk about Dougie P, well, the reason we didn't want him, I think we're pretty much in agreement here. It was a Matt Nagy thing. He seemed to have the same career arc that Nagy did. Granted, he won the Super Bowl in Philly. And the thing was, for me, we're not tuned in enough with the Eagles to know where Carson Wentz was to blame and where Doug Peterson was to blame. But it seemed like a lot of the league put that on Carson Wentz. And they were right. But we just didn't, we didn't know at the time. It was just one of those things like, dude, we got someone else. Because Dougie P was Kansas City too, no?
Yes.
Yeah. So it was like, we can't do this shit again. We're not doing a gray-haired man instead of a bald man from Kansas City. Just say it's the same shit. But it's okay being wrong. But I think we were thinking logically and not wanting Dougie P.
I don't even think it's a you and I thing either. I think it's most Bears fans would have hated that Doug Peterson hire to start with. I think we really would have, because it was basically the same offense. It was basically the same personality. It was a lot of similar things, obviously, except for, winning a Super Bowl, like you said. I just don't think the Bears would have ever, I don't know how realistic that was. And I think it also sort of says something that Ryan Poles, who had, I believe, some experience working with Doug Peterson in Kansas City, didn't move forward with him as the head coach. So I don't know how realistic Doug Peterson to the Bears ever was. I know he had sort of been hanging around with Matt Nagy. You remember that in the offseason when Matt Nagy had 8 offensive coordinators just sort of like hanging around. And Doug Peterson was one of them. So I think it would have felt more of the same, more continuing mediocrity. And Doug Peterson had some struggles at the end of Philadelphia. So it wasn't even a sure thing. And again, sometimes it's just the right fit, and it's the right quarterback, it's the right system, it's the right players. You got to remember, Doug Peterson is doing a lot with this offense, and it looks good and it's working great. But again, they have an offensive line. They were able to sign Christian Kirk and Zay Jones, and they had Marvin Jones, and they got Travis Etienne. The Bears aren't even close to that offense. You can't tell me Doug Peterson would have this team working properly with this offense.
No, and that's fair. But the one thing would be for certain is that we know for sure he would be able to do something after this draft, with the caveat being we actually surround Justin with talent.
Sure.
But yeah, and some of it though with Dougie P, and then we can move on. It's just common sense shit. Urban Meyer was trying to use Travis Etienne as a receiver. And it's like, he wanted Tim Tebow at tight end. You know what I mean? Dougie P is just being a baseline standard. And I'm not trying to take away from him. I'm just saying, the last situation was so bad that some of this common sense and, regular coaching just seems to blow your mind when it's every other coach would be making some of these decisions.
It's not like the Jaguars were they went from being the worst team in the league to being the number one seed,
right,
or anything like that. They won a terrible division. And, good for them. I don't want to take that away from them, but that is realistically what happened. It's not like Doug Peterson transformed them into, they look good. And that's why I'm picking them against the Kansas City Chiefs on the road. I'm definitely going to be wrong, but I think we can afford some mistakes. Giants at Philadelphia. Speaking of Doug Peterson and Carson Wentz, Philadelphia. Frankie, good call on the Giants. give you credit for that. But I think this is where their road ends. I'm going Philly.
I shouldn't have scoffed at you when you picked the Jaguars because doing the same exact thing here.
Yeah, you are.
And I'm going with the Giants, baby.
So
listen,
we both fell in love with the team then. That's all it is.
Yeah, I think I fell in love with them even before this year. I just like Brian Dable. I just think, everything that you heard about him in that coaching process, the hiring process last year, how could you not think this dude was going to be a successful head coach? Granted, the talent on this team, I don't think anyone thought this early, but now that they're doing it, nothing is in my brain telling me that they can't make it all the way to the Super Bowl. But it's because they do a couple of things that just travel. I don't care if it's the 1920s. I don't care if it's 2050. Running the football and defense will always travel. That just is what it is. And we're at a point now where Brian Dable has shown on the highest stage thus far of his head coaching career that he's still going to continue to put Daniel Jones in the best situation to succeed. And I'm not high on Danny. I'm giving more credit to Dable in this situation than I do Danny, but Danny still has to execute. And he's clearly been coached up very differently than coaches in the past. And to me, the Eagles got a quarterback that's dealing with the shoulder. That still seems a little out of sync when he came back week 18. Another week off may be good for rest, but talking about reps and things that were missed over, 3 weeks that he missed, 4 weeks that he missed? I don't know, Jackie. I can see this Giants team putting a lot of pressure on him. And not for nothing, this isn't to say that Jones is proven or anything like that. I'm not talking about the quarterback battle. Jalen Hurts is a better quarterback than Danny Dimes. We know that. But Jalen Hurts still has a little bit of proving to do after last year's playoffs. It was good experience. Sure. It was good experience. But this is a similar defense that he's facing. It's a team that's going to come and get you. This is a team that has a pass rush. It's a team that can stop the run. So, it may end up the Eagles win by 3 scores because they do have the superior talent here. But I'm just saying the Giants are working with a little something, they're cooking with grease. I think the scales balanced out with them. When they were 7-1, I think everyone rightfully thought they were fraudulent. They lost some games in a row and everyone was like, see, I told you so. But now they're at the point where it's sort of evened out when it's like, they're actually a pretty good team. They sort of are what their record was. They won 9 games. You know what I mean? It all evened out in the end.
So you scoff at me and then you basically say the exact same thing.
Shut the fuck up, Jack. I'm going with the Giants, baby.
I'm not going to listen to your advice this week. I'm going to stick with the Eagles,
dude.
Here's why. Hold on. Here's why. I'll explain why. Maybe this will convince you. The Eagles have a much better defense than the Minnesota Vikings do. I'm talking leaps and bounds better than what the Vikings have. And I don't think Danny Dimes is going to look like he has the last couple of weeks against this defense. I can't see that happening. And you're running out there with Isaiah Hodgins and Darius Slayton.
Both would be our number ones.
Yes, both would be our number ones. While on the other side, you got Jalen Hurts throwing the fucking AJ Brown and Devonta Smith.
Both would be our number ones.
Oh yeah, obviously they'd be like our fucking Hall of Fame. They're our best wide receivers in our franchise history, and that's probably not even close. But this Eagles team, it shouldn't be forgotten how good they were when everything was really working. And I don't know, I can't really see the Giants matching them pound for pound. But one thing I do want to make sure we state, because I think it's time, Frank. People might be mad at us. They might be like, hey, you guys have been yelling this at the top of your lungs for 3 years now, 4 years. I think the Bears need to sign Saquon Barkley if they get the chance to.
I agree.
Clutch those pearls.
We'll talk about it. We'll talk about it, but I agree. I think we've texted as to sort of the philosophy behind that, even though we generally don't value running backs. But yeah, I 100% agree. All right, Jackie, are we moving on to the next game?
Those are the Saturday games. Sunday is Cincinnati at Buffalo. I'm going Cincinnati. Buffalo looked like shit last week, and they haven't looked right in 2 months.
I know,
but Cincinnati didn't look all that great either. So I don't know.
I'm
sticking
going.
with Cincinnati.
I'm going Cincy as well. I told you that the Bills the last 3 years have had this weird lull that they just can't seem to snap out of. Granted, last year they played their best game probably, ever.
And still lost.
And a losing effort, right, against the Chiefs. So they sort of snapped that, but they look even more off this year than the last couple when they hit that lull. Something just seems off with them, man. And to me, the Bengals have continuously proved these last 2 years that they have multiple ways to win. Sometimes the defense steps up. Sometimes it's a big game from Joe Mixon. Sometimes it's fucking Joey B tossing for 450 and 5 touchdowns. And the Bills still haven't shown you that they can consistently run, even when they're running well. They just don't want to do it. Josh Allen can be on one of those down streaks, and they're like, nah, Singletary just busted off, 2 20-yard runs in the first half. That's it. We're not giving him the ball anymore. James Cook out here looking good. Like, I don't know. I don't trust them. I don't trust them as much as it seems like the rest of the NFL world does. I'm going Bengals.
I kind of wish this was at more of a neutral site. I don't really like.
I know
that
there's
it's in
been
Buffalo.
Yeah, I know there's been.
It's tough. It's a tough situation.
It is. Yeah.
But it is what it is.
If the Bills win this game and they go against either the Chiefs or the Jaguars, imagine, or maybe it may happen this week. DeMar Hamlin, right on the sideline, comes in. That play, whenever that does happen, if it happens, whether it's next year or this year, that place is going to be fucking electric. I'm sort of rooting for that, just for the atmosphere to
Yeah, that's fair. I think if they play Kansas City, I think it would be a neutral site. But
is that what they decided on?
Yeah, I think so.
So then, if they want that, they'd have to do that this week.
Yeah. I mean, still, even if it's neutral, it's going to be.
Oh yeah.
It's going to be crazy as it is.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I'm sticking with the Bengals. I don't know what Josh Allen is been doing I don't know what he was doing against was he just like, let's just test some shit out against the fucking Dolphins? Like
I don't.
Some
Yeah.
of those throws were just bad.
It was weird. And I mean, not for nothing, dude. That defense gave up a lot of fucking points to Skylar Thompson. We're talking shit. He made a couple bad throws, but he was a throw away from winning that ball game.
Well, those script writers weren't going to let that game get out of hand. So
That's true.
dude, we need to talk about that down the road, about how stupid people are about this script stuff.
Well, I mean, you know who is at the forefront of that, right? That's like their legitimate source of that.
Who is it? Tell
It's
me.
Larry Johnson, the former running back of the Chiefs.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
You haven't seen any of the crazy shit that he posts about and talks about? Yeah, he's like a huge conspiracy theory, and he's turned it into like the NFL is scripted. They used to hand me scripts. I have old scripts. He'll never show it to you because it's not true.
Yeah.
But
yeah,
they just take him at his word, and
we'll talk about that.
we should have a whole we should do a whole episode on it.
Did you hear Peyton Manning, by the way? I don't know if you saw it, but he was talking to Eli on the Monday night game, and he was like, they were basically shitting on people who think that halftime adjustments are a real thing.
That has
like,
been very prominent over the last few years because they weren't the first to say that. Was it Arian Foster? It was someone, and he was like, "That's made up by the media."
Yeah,
we have a plan for the whole game, but the plays themselves, it's only like a portion of the playbook. You never bring the whole playbook, and like we may decide that maybe we're gonna run the ball a tad bit more or do this, but it's never like some crazy okay, here's what we're gonna do, fellas. We're changing the whole thing. Like he's like, no, we prepared a whole week for this, and this is what we're gonna do. You see the whole thing out.
Yeah, Peyton was like, he basically was like, you go in, take a quick shower, use the bathroom, eat some food, and you go out and play. It's like, that was it.
Yeah,
that was interesting. Dallas at San Francisco. Congrats, good for Dallas, man. But come on, San Francisco is just on another level right now. They're what they are doing. I know we give props a lot, obviously, to Kyle Shanahan and just how he's able to churn out quarterbacks. But this was literally the last pick in the draft.
Yeah,
and Brock Purdy looks like, I have arguing with a lot of Packers fans who obviously just want to see the 49ers lose, and they just can't give him credit. It's a lot like Justin Fields. It's very interesting how Packers fans just can't accept when a quarterback is good. But it's not just the fact that he's throwing touchdowns. Like the box score looks great too. But man, some of those plays he was making, like getting out of guys like they have a clear sack, but no, he just avoids the pressure, steps up a little bit, and makes a great throw. Like it's incredible. I'm going San Francisco. This team might fucking win it all, if I'm being honest with you.
This I've changed my pick like 3 times on this one. This one to me was the hardest one to pick this week, to be honest with you, because that Cowboys defense that showed up against the Bucks, that was the first half of the season defense that Micah Parsons, Defensive Player of the Year talk type stuff was going on. I mean, wow, they look. I know everyone's clowning Brady old and he doesn't take hits, but there's a reason he looked like that. Tom Brady just didn't normally look like that. The way they stopped the run, the way they stopped Rachaad White and Lenny. I mean, I know people are high on Purdy, but he's playing a defense. If they play like that again, he's playing a defense that he has not played yet in the NFL. But then on the flip end, I'm a little scared about it. Can Dak do that again? Because he's going up against a defense that's probably the best in the NFC, or has been at least the second half of the year. And I sort of had to just come down of like, well, I know everyone's high on Brock Purdy. When you watch him, he's still making rookie mistakes. He still looks a little lost every now and then, which is normal. He's a rookie. That is what it is. I think that's going to come back to bite him this game. I think the Cowboys win this game, Jack. Wow. I think the Cowboys. I think the Cowboys win this game, and I think it has the potential to be an ugly one, like 14-12 type of game. I don't think it's going to be very high scoring. I don't. I think both of these defenses are going to come to play. I think Dallas is going to try to run the ball. I think the Niners are going to try to run the ball, but it's going to be one of those like fun back like Steelers Baltimore games. Remember those when those defenses were hitting each other? I think it's going to look like a lot like that.
So are you saying that the Cowboys are going to go for 2 to get to 14? Because you know damn well they're not making an extra point.
Dude, what the fuck was that?
I've never seen.
It's not even that he was missing them. That he caught the yips or whatever happened. You go for 2 after the second touchdown. I didn't under. And then especially the third one. Like, okay, what are we doing?
Mike McCarthy still being a bad head coach will never not be funny to me. Dude, Micah Parsons might be the best player in football, just at any position. If I'm being honest with you,
Micah. Oh, I don't know.
Dude, come on. The guy was literally everywhere.
No, he's phenomenal.
Everywhere.
He is incredible.
Okay, can I say one thing before we get out of here? Because I want to make sure I mention this. I was listening to obviously the Monday night broadcast. They said that Tom Brady was looking like Patrick Mahomes because he did that little flip.
No, I didn't hear that. That's insane.
It was like when he did like that little fake up run and then tossed it, and it was like a plus play. They're like, oh, he's looking like Patrick Mahomes and Josh. I'm like, come on, guys. You could say that about most quarterbacks, but come on, not Tom Brady. Come on.
My thing is like, and it's not to take away from anything from Pat. He's phenomenal. I think he's the best quarterback in the league. Did people miss Brett Favre? Did people miss like Steve Young? Like these aren't new Pat. Like Pat, the no look pass shit. That's Pat. I know it's been done a little bit before him, but he's like Pat. He's gotten that down. He perfected it.
It's just the Mahomes. They're saying
Mahomes, but it's so weird. Like that's not how this works. Like other people have made. You probably pull up some Terry Bradshaw highlights where he makes a scrambling play, like shuffle pass forward. Like, that's starting to get a little annoying.
And Frank, you were right. You were in on it. I would say definitely before. I would say 90% of the population. But Tony Romo has just evolved from this super insightful analyst to like he made you interested in what like you really wanted to listen to how he broke down plays. He's like gotten rid of that to just be this weird TV character to fit alongside Jim Nantz, and like he just makes these weird noises, and he's like I remember it was the first time you ever said it, and you were like, just listen to Romo next time, because he'll be like, Oh, and then there's the guy in the stands, and he's thinking, "What's going on out here?" And then
He does the
watched
inner
next
dialogue
game,
every
and
fucking game. I hate it.
it killed me. It fucking killed me.
And I feel like I ruined him for you because you really liked him. And then,
No,
like, the
but
next game you watched him, you were like, Frank, I think you're onto something here. But no,
You have
you're
to
right.
admit, you have to admit, he was good at first. He was at times like he was not what he is now. You have
Oh
to
no,
admit that.
he's almost become a caricature of it. But
yeah.
The first point, the insightful portion, yeah, he did bring things to the table that I was like, this is so cool. Like, he's not that far disconnected from the league. So for him to like break down a play and like show what it would, what might happen out of this formation or the different things you can do out of this formation, that was phenomenal. But there were those things sprinkled in that I was just like, I can't. Like, I needed him to be the third guy in the booth to like break down a play and then go shut the fuck up again and let the two guys do their thing. Because once you look at it over the long scope of things, to me it became like, here were your fun highlights. Here were like the 3 good Mitch Trubisky plays, and then we'll watch the whole game. You know what I mean? Like, That's what it became to me, and I can't do it with him. It's awful.
Give me more Greg Olsen.
I like Greg. I like Mark Sanchez a lot too.
He's a lot better than. RG3 is also really good.
RG3 has been solid. I miss. Did we hear Aqib Talib at all this year? He grew on me, and I fucking loved him.
He might have stopped. I don't know. Maybe
I need him back. I need him back because at first it took a little bit because we were just like, this feels weird. But then after like the second or third game with him, I was like, it's just fun. He's just being himself.
I want a game. Like I don't know if you remember, but there was a couple of years ago. Or a few years ago at this point, where it was like the NBA on TNT, they just had like the players, like they had former players.
And I think KG a part of that?
Yeah, and it did not work. It was horrible because basketball doesn't work like that. You can't just tell stories the entire game. It's not baseball.
Yeah, they did a podcast, yeah.
It was rough. But then I would love if like you got like Marshawn Lynch right up in the booth, and you get some other guys like that.
Jackie,
and just let him talk about the game.
I would pay pay-per-view for Marshawn Lynch. like what is the service that does the YouTube fighters DAZN?
The thing that's lost a ton of money and is in financial trouble. Yeah,
correct. Because they went. There's a whole thing where they tried to get into like real boxing too, and there was a business model that was just horrible. But I would sign up $5 a month to watch Marshawn Lynch and someone else commentate NFL, like do their version of Red Zone. I'm in. Yeah. I'm all in.
Replace Scott Hanson with Marshawn Lynch for 1 week. I think
the whole year.
That. Man, Scott Hanson.
Overrated.
You either love him or you hate him, and I'm kind of leaning towards the other way at this point.
I don't think I love him more. I'm more in the middle with him. I don't know. I like the guy before him. Who was the guy before him? I thought he was better.
Was there a guy before? I thought it was always Scott Hanson. Wow.
No, there was a guy before him. I'm forgetting what his name was, but he was better.
I like Scott. He just at times is like a little too goofy for me. I think that's what it is. But
yeah, but then it's also like, I don't know. He never like changes his.
Yeah.
He's like too the same way. It's like one gear, because even when like, oh, it's like Veterans Day and he's like, we have our veterans in, it's like everything is the same. It's never like I'm excited. It's just like the same. It's that same tone every single time.
I agree, but we won't have to worry about him for quite some time because none of these playoff games are on Red Zone. But terrible transition, but doesn't matter. This has been the Bear With Us podcast. I'm Jack. He's Frank. As always, we really appreciate you guys listening. Next week, obviously, we'll talk a little bit more Bears if any other news comes out. I really don't know what news there'll be. Maybe we'll talk a little bit about the overall QB carousel because, I mean, it's just getting out of control. Keep an eye on some of those head coaching hires. There hasn't been one yet, which is interesting. But we'll keep an eye on that. And then, of course, we'll talk about the NFC and AFC championship games. And then before we know it, we'll be talking about the Pro Bowl and flag football and all that good stuff. Well, I will say I'm interested to see Peyton and Eli coach that. I think that's going to be fun.
That's going to be great.
It's going to be great. But thank you guys for listening. Till next week. We'll talk to you then.
Later, Jackie. Later, everybody.
Everybody love everybody!